everyone, Haley here. Welcome for another Holistic Creative Chat. I am so excited about today's guest. Oh my gosh. This is Kelly Johnson. She is the woman behind a website and a book called Wings, Worms, and Wonder. Artist, teacher, and Kelly is a garden guide. I absolutely love that. Kelly, I think you are doing some of the most important work out there because you're on a mission to help people grow their own in their gardens and to bring arts-based nature connection to adults and children. I think that is such important work. So thank you for the work you do, and thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I'm excited to be here too.
Yay! So Kelly is also one of our featured Spectrum teachers this year. And Kelly, again, it goes right around this work that Kelly does that is just so incredible about integrating nature and creativity. And Kelly, you have this like vision. Maybe I'm like projecting this onto what you do. This is my vision, but it's like right in line like with what you do. I mean, this is important stuff for our future, for our world, and what you see so clearly is that we have to do this with what our future is, and our future is our children. And I can't thank you enough. I'm just taking the moment to say thank you, thank you, thank you. And the workshop that you're bringing to Spectrum is called Expressing Your Sensory Connections with Nature Using Shape, Form, and Color, right? Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. And it's a beautiful workshop. So the question I like to start with so that we can get to know you a little bit and your relationship with creativity is if you could share a story or just something that comes to mind of a time in your life or your creative practice or perhaps your gardening practice when or any personal practice, because I know that you bring a lot of yoga philosophy into your work as well. When the connection between creativity and healing were undeniable for you.
I think that really ties back to when I was an adolescent. I grew up sort of in this multi-world. Like I've always felt like I had feet in different worlds and I wasn't 100% in any of those worlds. So I grew up in the normal, 1970s, 1980s kid in the suburbs, kind of country club neighborhood kind of thing, but very woodsy. Mm-hmm. I guess they don't really make neighborhoods like that anymore, but tons of woods and tons of paths through the woods that led to lakes and creeks and even woodsy wild areas. But then my other foot, my grandparents lived pretty close in the same town, not walking distance, but pretty close. And they didn't grow up in Richmond, but they grew up a little outside of Richmond in the country, and they were all farmers. Mm. And so my grandparents grew most of our own food. And what we didn't get from them, we got from my grandfather's sisters or my grandmother's sister's husband. So much of what we ate came from the land that our family was such a part of. And I didn't realize this as a kid. You don't think about it when you're a kid. Of course you're, growing butter beans with your grandpa and shelling them on the front porch with your great grandma. That's just it's just what you do while she's crocheting. And then you go back to the suburbs and you play Barbies and watch MTV. Like it's just what you do. And then, the other foot was I was very, very fortunate in that my family, Virginia is wonderful. I grew up in Virginia. So those of you that know, you have so much access to, growing up in Richmond, 2 hours to the beach, 2 hours to the mountains, 45 minutes to really rural areas. And the neighborhood that I grew up in was extremely rural, dirt roads at the time when we lived there. Mm-hmm. So I got to go to the mountains all the time. I got to go to the beach all the time in the summer. So I also had these landscapes coming to me, but then take that and become an adolescent who is so, the risk of sounding very like destined to be an artist, like at their core. And they start noticing like, wait, I don't fit here. And wait, I'm not okay with, and at the time you don't know these words, but like these separation and privileges and things. And this like, consumer culture, but I didn't know I wasn't okay with it. So I gravitated towards, Richmond had a very thriving punk rock scene it still does. So as very young, I remember probably being 7 or 8, and my dad would take us to the movies down in the city because my parents grew up in the city. And I saw this girl, and she was tall, and she had long blonde hair, just like me, and she had combat boots and this snake bracelet. And I was like, this I resonate with, like these artists, because I was around DIY farmers and crafters and doers because they came from the country and that's just how you live. But I wasn't around artists. And that's when I first remember seeing them and thinking, this, I don't know what it is, but this, yes. Yeah. And so it stuck with me. And it wasn't like I only saw it one time, Right. And so by the time I was an adolescent, I really started gravitating towards that scene and the music and the fact that it was so arts integrated and people saying, hey, these things aren't right. Like looking at social justice, looking at environmental justice, and using art, whether it was music or visual art, as a way to express this discontent, but not just discontent, and not the 80s style punk rock where we just break bottles and trash things. Like really positive, like change making, and almost like a family. Like we're here for each other, and we're gonna make change, and we're gonna build this creative community. That's our world. That's what we want. And so that really played a part in what I like to call, well, I didn't come up with this, but Mitchell Chalmers' show calls ecological identity. And like part of my landscape, my personal creative and ecological landscape is that I have the farms and the mountains and the beach. And I also have the urban, and like where those all fit, like a Venn diagram, like I feel like I really fall right in the middle of that. And that's where my creativity comes from, because within the city, there's so much wild nature to be found. There's weeds in the sidewalk. And if you just slow down and take a minute to like let your little sense of wonder like spark through, you'll notice all these wonderful things wherever you are, whether it's the suburbs or the city or a farm or in the woods in the Blue Ridge Mountains or out in the ocean. It's always there. And I feel like sometimes that's hard to remember it for people in busy life. So that's that's a little bit of a sidetrack. But adolescence, I would say, is where I really started solidifying, because I had so much anger about the social and environmental injustices that I was seeing, and about the way, because I'm trying to do something different, the way I was treated by like normative culture. And my creative practice was my sanity at that point. It truly kept me sane, to the point where my parents even let me drop classes in high school to take independent study art classes, because even they could see that. And I was so fortunate that my parents were really supportive of the arts. And, the fashion friends with mohawks took a little while to ease them into.
I'm sure.
And it's hard to, we have to put it in perspective, because now every first grader has pink hair.
Right.
But in 1991, it was, first graders didn't have pink hair.
That's my generation too. It's crazy.
Remember.
Yeah.
And so, it was really, I wouldn't trade like all the tears and the fights for anything, because that really it pushed me into art. It pushed me, it showed me like, I don't have a choice in this matter. Like I have to create, and at that time I was really, I always was interested in everything, whether it was stained glass or I would take metal casting. I was fortunate that Richmond has a really big art school. So I had so much community education classes and things at my disposal, and my parents were really supportive of that from when I was very young. So I was able to try all kinds of things. But at that time in adolescence, I really was interested in photography and showing these injustices and showing these juxtapositions of, weeds in the city and things like that. And then when I went to art school, that really grounded even more. And then taking that, these ideas that the imagery that photography allows you to have. And at the time, it was film,
Yeah.
not digital, but and then I channeled that into using historic processes. So I came back sort of full circle to where when I was younger and I was always painting and drawing. So I was painting emulsions onto watercolor paper or wood, and then using cyanotype to print, or gum bichromate to print on top of that, and then doing paintings and drawings on top of that. So, and then as I got out of school and didn't have those resources, I went into just a lot more painting. But hint, hint, there's going to be some cyanotypes coming in the near future. But yeah, so it was, I would really say around age 15 is when
I love that. And you have hit on that in that story. First of all, you're a great storyteller. And then and in sharing that, you hit on so many parts of the creative process that are just so potent. And like you saw the girl and the recognition of, yes, there's something more here that I hunger for inside myself that is a piece of me. And then you moved toward that. And then your creativity became, so you had all these feelings and these emotions and these issues is not the right word, but these interests and issues, of our world on a grander scale, this bigger vision, not just anymore like this little space we have when we're younger, and you had all these things, and your creativity became the outlet, the way of processing that. And also what you touched on, which is super important for a creative process, is you had a support system. And we don't often talk about that enough, but a lot of people don't have that. And some people persevere with their creativity anyway, but other people don't. And so the support system becomes such an important piece in being able to develop that full landscape of your identity. And I love that term that you shared with us from that, I forget the name of the person you said, but ecological identity. Wow, I haven't ever heard that term before, but that is fantastic. I love that. That really resonates with me, at least. It's incredible.
He has a whole book, Mitchell Thomas Show. He has a whole book of the same title, and it's just fantastic. The work that he does with that, I learned about it in graduate school actually, and kind of blew my mind. I was like, yes, there's so many parts and pieces, like the web of ecology, the web of creativity, that all these things that have happened to us in life, or things we were exposed to, that form to make our whole. And it's always growing. It's, and it's always, it's sort of like in the garden, like building your soil, you keep building your soil, and our webs of creative process and creative expression, they're always changing. I mean, in the late 90s, early 2000s, I was a mural painter. It was amazing. I traveled all around the country, like painting murals. Who would have thought of that, but then I don't do that. Now I paint pretty small, so it's interesting how just life's ebb and flow. We do different things.
And that's what I love. Like I often say, and I write about this off and on, because I often say my muse is nature. It's Mother Nature. And it's because nature and creativity, they're just undeniable. You go out in nature, you get inspired. I mean, if you slow down and you pay attention, and you connect, whatever that looks like for you, whatever the landscape is of the place, whether it's on a macro or a micro level, there is an abundance of inspiration, and then when I come to my creative practice too, what I find is that it can create, even when I'm painting in my studio and with, my lights on and all this stuff, it can create that memory of that same sort of connection. And then also the impetus to go out and reconnect with nature. So it becomes this cyclical thing. They feed one another.
It's so true, because you sort of carry, in Japan they call it, they have something called forest bathing, where you go out, doctors prescribe it, which is pretty outrageous, amazing. You go and that energy, and they've noticed that people come back to the city after just being in nature, and the feeling that the endorphins maybe, or whatever happens in our bodies when we're in nature, because nature is where we came from. It's our home.
Absolutely. It's where we go back to.
Exactly. That so it stays with them for a period of time. And I think it's so true. And because nature it's just always, it doesn't even matter. Like I said, it's the tiniest little thing. I even say to some of my students or friends, or when I'm people who are just starting, they have an interest, but they maybe are just starting out in nature journaling and building up their confidence, and maybe they haven't really had a creative practice previously, or not in this sort of format. People that are from a very, very urban environment and maybe nature isn't a place where they can really relax yet, go to your refrigerator. The food, the veggies in your refrigerator are nature. Get out your favorite vegetable and spend some time with it.
Let's remember what nature is. It's everything.
Yes, it's everything that, I mean, a really lovely piece of wood, all of these things. And it's like stepping stones, like for you to sort of meet your nature inspired creative process where you are. And I say a lot of times you don't have to have a full garden. If you do, that's wonderful, but you can just get a tiny little potted plant. Mm-hmm. And that is living nature too. And you can connect with that just as deeply as you could with, the woods and there's different feelings. And I mean, we all know that different landscapes give us different feelings, but it's not, some people think, oh, well, it's not as good. Yeah. No. There's no good. Like if it makes you feel good and inspired and peaceful, that's good.
Well, and the healing piece of it is so fascinating to me too. Like I love the what you brought up about the thing they do in Japan with the forest bathing. It could be hormonal. I'm certain it is. Mm-hmm. And just energetic. We know that there's an energetic healing that happens. Yes. It's like places with negative ions in the environment, literally. Physically have that effect upon us, and visualization actually affects the physical body. So it reminds me, because sometimes you can find like a little, like I think the macro, the macro, you can find a little space of land in your yard, and it might look like the desert. And if you can go there and you can sit with that little space and kind of be with it, and if you've been to the desert, it's even more profound, for instance, but you can pull upon that memory, and your body literally and your mentality, your emotions can go back into that space just for a little moment with this little patch of 6x6 inch space in your yard, like
it's so true. And in my book, I actually have a lesson in there called Life in a Square. Nice. And I say do it for 2 weeks, up to a year or longer, but designate a little square, whatever size is right. And a lot of times with kids, you'll make the square and you'll go out and be like, what do you see? Yeah. They'll be like, there's nothing there. Like, nothing? Are you sure? Yeah. And how, well, what about that? And what about, and you start to see in all the life and abundance. Like you said, even in the desert where you think, well, it's just sand. Yeah. But if you watch it, it's so much more. Yeah. So much more. And that's sort of how this whole thing evolved, because I always made art, and I had taught a little art, like I used to teach snowboarding, and I worked a couple days in the kids program, and they were like, oh, you can do art, you do that. But you're doing today's project, But in 2000, I started teaching art at a Montessori school one day a week. And that sort of grew into a week-long summer camp, which in 2004 grew into me getting my Montessori teacher training. And from 2004 to 2010, I was a first and second grade Montessori teacher, along with the elementary music teacher and the elementary art teacher and the gardening teacher.
Oh my gosh.
But it was that first class in 2004 of first and second graders who kind of kicked this whole thing off. I really have to kind of give them credit to what I'm doing today. And some of them I'm even still friends with, like on Pinterest. They follow me. They're so cute. They're like in high school now.
Oh my gosh.
Graduating. One of them, the second graders are freshmen in college. It's crazy. I wrote some recommendation letters. Anyway, that's another story, but that totally blew my mind.
Time flies.
So with their lunches were what made me think of it was, oh my gosh, their grandpas aren't growing their tomatoes in their lunches, like if they were eating cherry tomatoes. And so I was like, whoa, I have to be their grandpa. Like they're not getting this, And so I got a little grant, and I planted a little tiny garden outside our classroom. And then one day soon, and that was a hit in its own right. Children, kids love, and they eat what they grow, and parents are like, they don't eat anything. I'm like, well, they're eating raw kale, like, out of their hands. Like, no, they're not. I'm like, yeah, they are.
Yeah, they
but they are, trust me. They're not for you, but they are for me.
Yeah.
Sorry. I like big with my hands. But so then one day the music teacher, I wasn't teaching music at this time, she didn't arrive, and something had come up and she had to cancel. So I said, well, let's take our sketchbooks outside in the garden and draw. Mm-hmm. And that's what started it. I didn't know anything about the historic nature study movement at this time. I didn't know nature journaling was a thing. I knew I liked to draw nature, and I knew I had 45 minutes I needed to fill.
Yeah.
So
a bunch
I said,
of kids.
22 kids in a blank 45 minutes. I was like, we're going outside.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. Like the energy level that came over them, the inspiration and the wonder and the excitement and the attention to detail, not to mention like their drawings and, thinking about what is good in art. Authenticity is what is good. And the authenticity, and I like to remind people, like, children's art is amazing because it's authentic.
Yes.
And so as long as you're being you, you're being amazing. Just like, the sunflower is not worried about whether it looks like the hibiscus, because they're both being them and they're being amazing. So that was sort of what kicked it off. And then I realized, wow, we're doing this every week. This is fantastic. And we're bringing our sketchbooks with us on field trips. And, we go on different types of field trips, but whether it was museum or to like a state park, we'd like be hiking and kids would be like, oh, I'm so hot. Oh, the bugs. Oh, some are running. As soon as I break out those nature journal sketchbooks, it's like focus.
The attention is channeled and focused. That is so beautiful, Kelly.
It's so amazing. Yeah. And then, say, with this age, we're maybe 20 minutes or so on a field trip, and they're drawing, and then the rest of the hike or whatever, they're so engaged. And look at this, and Katie found this bug, and oh my gosh, here's this. And everyone, it not only like connected the child individually, but it connected the group in like this collective, like nature did that for us, and creativity did that for us. We connected through our creative connection to this natural environment. And I think that is just the power of nature and creativity. And I feel like they're inseparable, really. And if we can slow down, and that's what I also like to be like, let this be your excuse. Whether you're taking the class in Spectrum, let Spectrum be your excuse to be like, sorry, I'm saying no to this noise right now because I've got creative homework.
That's right. Yeah, my homework is to go sit outside and draw this plant over here. It's important.
Exactly. And sometimes for the outer world who maybe isn't resonating in that space at that moment, they get that. Oh, she's taking a class. She has homework.
Yes.
You can use the language.
Frame it in a way. Exactly.
Yeah. But for you, like, oh, I'm tapping into this flow and I am going to feel so good after.
Yes. Oh, Kelly, I love it. I think you're the bee's knees. Oh my gosh. That was, yes, thank you. There were so many beautiful golden nuggets in there. But the one that really jumps out at me, and you know this, but I'm just going to say it out loud too, is that the funny part is that these things that children remind us of, and that you discovered with working with these children, they're so often the very same things that adults need to remember too. That's why I work primarily with adults, and it's the same sort of stuff. It's just a little bit difficult to peel away the layers sometimes to get us to those moments.
It's so true. That's how this kind of grew, because with the children sparked wonder, they took that home.
Yes.
And then I had the parents starting to come to me. Yeah. And, oh my gosh, Allison wants a garden for her 8th birthday. What am I going to do? I'm like, we've got this. You realize your 8-year-old's asking for vegetables for her birthday, right? Like, this is awesome. And then with the art, the parents would get really interested in doing nature journaling with the children, some of them took it home, and then it became a family practice.
Yes.
And so then in 2010, when I left the classroom full time to go back to grad school and write the book, and then embark in 2012 on the Wings, Worms, and Wonder journey, that's why I started creating things for adults, because they need it and crave it just as bad. And the children inspired it, and oftentimes the children, and for a lot of people who have children, the children kind of give them permission, like to the rest of the world, oh, I have kids, I'm doing this with my kids.
Absolutely.
But it's fantastic, because even now people without children are saying, I need this. Richard Louv calls it vitamin N.
Oh, I love that. Vitamin N. Oh, it's so true. People are hungry for it. And it's wonderful to be part of being aware of that and doing that for ourselves in our own lives. And what you're like describing, feeling it in our families reconnecting through that, which of course expands out into communities and that sort of thing. And so beautiful work.
What you said about having the support system.
Yes, exactly.
You know, and whether your family is your blood relatives or an outer non-blood, family is family. Your support is your support. And it's all just so wonderfully connected in how it grows, because people see those benefits when you start spending time in nature in creative practice. People start to see in you a change, and then they want to get in on that, and then it spreads.
Yes. And to me, like I have a relatively, an expansive or loose definition of healing, which is where we kind of started with this. And oftentimes we talk about it as a remembering of these sorts of things, and it's remembering that connection piece, that everything's connected. And I love what you said earlier, where basically you said, if you're being you're being amazing. That's enough. That's it right there. Do that, and let that be what happens when you're with others and when you're out in nature. So thank you, Kelly, for sharing all of your wisdom around this. It's just so inspiring. Do you have anything that coming up that you would like to share with people, or anything specific at your site? Of course, you have your book, which you mentioned. I'm so glad. It looks so beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, the book is, it's actually it's about to change into an ebook format. So it's interesting to that journey, and how that led into my newish in the past year online school for nature journaling classes. So I do have a new course coming up called Draw Deeper into Nature, which can be bundled with my original Draw Yourself Back to Nature, which is what I wanted to create, this thing to give grown-ups an excuse to make nature-inspired art and to work on their creative connections, but to also work on their connections with the nature right outside their door. It doesn't have to be Yosemite. It can be a flower pot on your patio, and it can be just as wonderful. So I have some new e-courses coming up that are available right now.
I love it. And we'll be putting a link to your website beneath the video too. And your website is beautiful. There's so much gorgeous inspiration there, and freebies and courses, and there's information about your book, and just your story is wonderful, wonderfully displayed at your site. So thank you, everybody, for listening in. Thank you, Kelly, for being here.
Thank you.
And I encourage you to go visit Kelly at her site too. Bye-bye.
Bye.